Glad that you're here. If it's your first time here, welcome. If it's your 30th time here, welcome. If it's your 400th time here, welcome. If you're online, welcome. If you are new, make sure you go to the guest hub because we got cool gifts for you afterwards. So with that being said, if you want to follow along with digital notes, sometimes I put more links and stuff in there. There's digital versions of the paper copy if you want to do that. So I'm going to pray while you guys, if you decide you want to do that, if you know how to do the QR code thing, if you don't, talk to somebody that's under 15 and they'll teach you. So anyways, Jesus, we love you. We thank you. We're excited to come today into your presence. We're excited today to look at your word and the book of John and how you give us life. You're the author of life. You're the only way we can get to life, and that you loved us enough that you came. So God, I pray that as we spend some time today studying your word, that you would teach us, that you would open our hearts and our minds and our eyes into the things you have for us today, and that we could be transformed a little bit more into your image. So meet with us in your name. Amen. All right. So have any of you guys ever seen on the news, maybe, or different situations, maybe hopefully not in person, but when there's floods coming, right? And there's the house, and you got somebody on top of the house, and they're trying to figure out how to get rescued. You guys all familiar with that? Right? The waters are rising. It's not a good looking situation. And then eventually a helicopter comes in, hopefully a helicopter comes in, drops the rope down and picks them up. You know what I'm talking about? It's like this picture right here. You know what I'm saying? This whole scenario. You guys familiar with that idea? What's that? You got a bingo already? Wow, you guys got a heads up. Whoever I hit with that, I'm sorry. It goes to Chris. Yeah, so two more left. All right, so the helicopter's there and trying to rescue the person, pull him up off the top of the list, the roof. And I saw this documentary interview thing with a guy that does that, who hangs down off the end of the deal. And they were talking to him about the whole deal. And he said that one of the hardest things about this job is, guess what? Getting people to go with. No, people want to go with. There'd be people, arguably if you're here, they want to go with you. What would be in your mind, what would be the hardest part of that job? They want to take all their stuff with them. Seriously. Hey, yeah. Maybe. No, I don't know, do hoarders make it? No, just kidding. So here they are. They're literally in a life or death situation, and here's help coming, and the guys there trying to get them, and they don't want to let go of what they got to get out of it. You'd think hey, maybe not swinging into a power line. That might be kind of hard part of the job. I'd think maybe your helicopter driver would be good. Hanging on the harness down there to get down, grabbing them, all that stuff. No, they said the hardest part of the whole thing is getting people to let go. They want to hang on to the support coming out, but they also want to hang on to what they got. And until you can get them to let go, there's no hope of saving them. And I thought that was interesting, right? That has always stuck with me, this idea of if you want to be rescued on this, you got to let go of what's there. Now, probably there's nothing in the house that's totally irreplaceable. Maybe you have the Mona Lisa there because you ripped it off or something from the art gallery where it lives, and you've flipped a fake one in there or something. I don't know. You got the original. But whatever you have, it's probably your life is what's more important. Life, all the stuff can be replaced, but people don't want to let go. And as we're looking through the book of John, we're getting to the text tonight as we're continuing on in John chapter 11. I was studying the text, and as I was looking at it, there was a thought that hit me, and it's that most people don't want to let go of what they have because they're afraid of losing normal, and it keeps them from getting Jesus. And so the main idea we're going to look at tonight is this idea of, I keep saying tonight, we used to do Sunday evening church. We switched to Sunday morning, so you know what time of day it is. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So let go. We're 11's the new 5, right? Okay, so let go to grab onto real life, right? In your life, there are going to be things that you have to let go of so you can hang on to salvation, right? To reach Jesus, to get a hold of Jesus, allow Jesus to save you, there are things that you have to be willing to let go of. And so we're going to look at this idea today as we're going through the text. It's in John chapter 11 is where we're at today, John chapter 11, starting with verse 44. If you weren't here last week or didn't watch online or something and get caught up, we just finished off the section with Lazarus, right? Lazarus was Jesus' friend. Lazarus dies. They send a message to Jesus saying, hey, he's sick, he doesn't come in time intentionally. And then Lazarus dies, and then Jesus does this miracle, resurrects Lazarus to life, and teaches that he is the resurrection and the life. And then we're picking up after that. So immediately in the aftermath of seeing the resurrection of Lazarus is where we're picking up in John chapter 11. And so, I'll have it up here. But if you don't have a Bible, we'd love to give you a Bible, by the way. So John chapter 11, verse 45. Now this is transitioning from the section with Lazarus and taking him into the Passover week, or the final week before his crucifixion, is where we're at in the book of John, and it's making a transition. So here he is. Jesus says to Lazarus, or Lazarus comes up, and he says, unwrap him and let him go. That's pretty cool thing to see, right? So here's where it ends up happening to pick up from there. There's a plot to kill Jesus. Can you imagine that? Just before we get into it, like this idea that you just saw the resurrection of somebody who has literally life and death power, bring somebody back to life, and the thought that they have is, we got to kill this dude. Right? Like, I don't know. All right, here he is. So, what's that? Oh, okay. Yeah. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. Now, this is Mary and Martha. These are the sisters of Lazarus. So they were there. They saw this happen. And his first phrase, many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. Now, arguably, if you're at the place where you see somebody claim to be the resurrection and the life, somebody who claims to have power over death, and then says to a grave that has somebody who's been rotting in there for 4 days, say, come out, and this body comes out, and you'd expect to see like a rotting, stinking body, and instead he comes out and they unwrap him, right? You see that happen. Put yourself in that situation for a second. You see that happen. Arguably, I think that would be some pretty convincing evidence that maybe you should listen to what this guy has to say, right? This Jesus dude. And so many of the people do, but when you see many of the people do, that means some didn't. Right? By default, some didn't. There are people who literally saw the resurrection power of Jesus before the cross, and they didn't even believe in him, even though they physically could see it. That just hit me crazy. So here we are. So some of those that don't believe, says, but some of them, that's the ones who don't believe, went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Again, the Pharisees is this religious group, the people who were trying to, they were in the Levitical law. They were the people who followed the Torah or the Old Testament. They were concerned about ritual purity. They were concerned about following the law of Moses, which was good, but the law of Moses pointed to Jesus, and they missed that. And so the Pharisees don't like the fact that Jesus is coming and interrupting things. He's not following the status quo, so to speak. And they're missing the fact that all of the law was to point to Jesus. So they're trying to figure out how to get rid of him. So here they are. Some people go to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus has done. And so then the leading priests and Pharisees called the high council together, which is all the important people in the Jerusalem council area, and said, what are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miracles, miraculous signs. And if we allow him to go on this with this, soon everyone will believe in him. Now, is that a bad thing? To them, yes. Now, why would they think that that's a bad thing? Why would they not want people to believe in Jesus? This is a guy, he's healing the sick. We saw a little bit ago, there was a blind guy. He healed the blind. He's done so many miracles, and yet, as they're going through, there's people that are mad that he's doing miracles because they're afraid that the people are going to start following Jesus. Now, he says, then the Roman army will come in and destroy both our temple and our nation. Now, what that phrase means, or what's the high council, the priests, the Pharisees are worried about, is the fact that Israel at this time is under Roman occupation. So the world power, so to speak, at the time is Rome. And Rome ruled with a brutal fist, right? They had this thing called, the Pax Romana, or the peace of Rome, but it was like a false peace. It was a peace through brutality. It was peaceful because if you stepped out of line, Rome would crush you. All right, and so the way Rome ruled at the time over all these different nations, because they didn't have enough soldiers to physically put a presence in every city to an extent that could happen. You have 1 or 2 soldiers in an area, and everybody's could easily overthrow the 1 or 2 soldiers. And so what they would do is they would keep the local governments in place, but they were kind of puppet governments under Rome. And so the Roman soldiers, they would be a little bit everywhere, but not really strong anywhere. But as soon as there was an uprising, as soon as there was some sort of disagreement, as soon as there was any kind of rebellion, they send in the legions. And the legions come in, and they just squash it, right? They want to make a statement that you don't mess with Rome. And some of the Jewish historical accounts that we have, non-biblical sources, there's a time where there's a rebellion in a city documented, and they came in and they started just crucifying everybody. Jesus isn't the only one that was crucified. He's the only one that came back to life after being crucified. But they were great at crucifixion. They knew how to kill people. And it wasn't where we today have the death penalty and we don't put it on the news or anything. They made it as public as they could. It was a public way of killing people. And it was to send a message, you don't mess with Rome. And so they put you on the highways. So as everybody's traveling, they would see these people that would live for days on a cross as a living, breathing billboard on their way to die saying, don't mess with Rome. And so they're like the account I was talking about, they came in and it says like they crucified somebody every 30 feet for miles down the road. Rome came in and they don't care who they're just grabbing people. There's an uprising, we're grabbing you, you go on a cross, you're going on the road, and you don't come off. Like it's a death sentence. And so that's part of what they're worried about here. They're saying we can't have this commotion going on. Jesus is causing problems. And yes, it's cool that he's raising people from the dead. Yes, it's great that he has resurrection power, but it's going to overthrow the whole system. If people start going and following, it's going to look like an uprising, and then Rome's going to come in, and they're just going to be brutal and kill everything. We got to do something. What are we going to do with this? And they have to make some sort of conclusion, because the reality is like Jesus, he disrupts your life. Right? Like, I sometimes think of, I hear of preachers in good faith, and maybe I've done it at times, but like they'll say all these things like, oh, if you come to Jesus, like your life will be rosy. If you come to Jesus, like you're going to have all these beautiful things. If you come to Jesus, it's, your bank account's going to be full. If you come to Jesus, your relationships are all going to work out. If you come to Jesus, like all this stuff, like why you should come to Jesus. And the reality is when Jesus is like confronting you in your life, or when Jesus is there, like it disrupts things. And that's good, but it's also terrifying. Because not everybody was believing in believing in Jesus as Lazarus was resurrected. Not everybody's believing Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And so here they are. They have to figure out, what are we going to do? They can't go on with life as usual. And if they don't pick a side, it's probably going to be catastrophic. Now, fast forwarding, another 30, 40 years down the road, Rome does come in. But we'll get to that in a minute. But the reality is in all of our lives, Jesus will disrupt your life. Have you noticed in everybody that's... in the whole world, I guess I should say, like everybody has an opinion on Jesus, right? Like every belief system that's out there, I don't see mocked the same way Christianity's mocked. Have you noticed that? When's the last time you saw a song or heard a song on the radio, you saw a movie mocking Buddha? When's the last time you saw Krishna getting mocked? And yet you don't have to go very far to find somebody who has strong opinions about Jesus, both for or against. And just that alone tells me there's something about this Jesus dude, right? And everybody in the world has to make some sort of confrontation with, what are we going to do with Jesus? What am I going to do with Jesus, right? Everyone has to make a decision on what to do with Jesus. And it's normal for people to reject Jesus, because just like they rejected him then, there's people that reject him now. And Jesus has some arguably controversial things. He's making some bold claims. He's saying, hey, you know what? You can't be part of this kingdom and be part of my kingdom, like the kingdom of the world. You can't love God and money. You can't, you do good to those that persecute you. Turn the other cheek. Let go of this world. Sell everything in this world to find the true joy in Jesus, right? Like he makes some claims that he is the only way to the Father. He's the only way that there's resurrection power. And so you have to come to a place, everybody will come to a place where Jesus comes in and he disrupts your life. And you can't move on. That's normal. That's what's happening here. They're trying to figure out, what are we going to do with Jesus? The Romans are going to come in and kill us all if we don't do something with him. Destroy our nation. So here's where they go with it. Caiaphas. Now Caiaphas is the high priest. I guess it says that in the text. I was going to tell you who he is, and then the text tells you who he is. So Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, said, and he's talking to this Jewish council again, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than the whole nation to be destroyed. Now, in his mind, Caiaphas is saying something he doesn't fully get. He's making a statement in his mind saying, hey, you know what? The whole nation's going to be destroyed under Rome, so we should kill this Jesus dude. Because it's better that Jesus dies than all of Israel dies under Rome. Right? If Rome's going to come in and just start squelching the rebellion, just start grabbing and crucifying people, just start mass murder to shut this thing down, to say, hey, go back to the peace, right? Don't you think it's better that we just kill Jesus and do away with the uprising? So in Caiaphas' mind, that's what he's doing, but he doesn't know that he's putting into place things that are actually fulfillment of the very law he's trying to protect. Fulfillment of the will of God, the God he thinks he's serving. And that is the fact that Jesus has to die. He has to go to the cross. And we're, over the next several months as we keep going through the book, we're going to look at how Jesus has destroyed the power of sin. His resurrection brings us into the opportunity to have life in Christ. And he can break the bonds of sin on us. He can break the demonic powers that hold us down. He can give us access to the Father. And so that's where the text is transitioning to, is the last week of Jesus. But here he is. He's making the statement thinking he's holding on to what he knows. But what he's holding on to is actually missing the whole point. Verse 51, he, meaning Caiaphas in that statement, did not say this on his own, but as high priest at the time, he was led to prophesy that Jesus would die for the entire nation. So the author John is telling us here, he's like, hey, Caiaphas didn't even get what he was saying, but he's making a statement that is so true. And not only for the nation, but to bring together and unite the children of God scattered around the world. See, here's what's happening. Jesus is going to die, not to protect Israel, but Jesus is going to die to actually heal the world. Jesus is going to die to bring more than just Israel in. He's going to bring the Gentiles in, which is great, because I'm not Israeli. I'm not Jewish. I'm a Gentile, right? Like, I don't even honestly know my full ethnic heritage. I don't know. I guess if I give them my DNA, they'll tell me, right? But I don't even know if I care that much. I don't know what some of our animals were. They're mutts, right? I'm a mutt. I don't know what I am. But like, I'm one of the people that can be brought together through the death of Jesus. And so while they're thinking Jesus needs to die to save us from Rome coming and killing us all, the reality is God's plan is Jesus is the only one who's capable of dying the death that needs to be happening so that humanity can be set free. And not just the Jewish nation, but the whole world, which includes us. Right? Because the reality is if you're in this room, you may have Jewish descent. I don't know. Maybe you do. If you're in this room, though, you may not have Jewish descent. I don't know. But you're probably in one of those two categories, right? You're either in, you're not. But the reality is it's about how Jesus is bringing everything together, all the children, bringing together to unite the children of God scattered around the world. By the way, we're around the world. And so it comes to this idea of what are we going to do? Are we going to try holding on to what was, like Caiaphas was, or are we going to let go of what we think is normal in our life so we can have Jesus? And we're going to start seeing that if you attempt to hang on to normal, it will actually make you lose everything. If you're unwilling to let go of what you think normal is, let go of the control in your life, let go of the gods you worship in your life, whether you realize it or not, let go of everything that is consuming your life. And there are so many gods. Some of them are like literal, like spiritual demonic beings that we try to worship. Sometimes it's like money, sometimes it's sex, sometimes it's relationships, sometimes it can even be a good relationship. Like I've talked to people that are married that literally have their spouse as their God. Right? Like that's one thing Michelle and I had to learn in our marriage is don't put each other in the place of God. I love God and I serve Jesus. I give everything to Jesus, and I love and serve Michelle as a daughter of the King, but she cannot replace Jesus in my life. And I sometimes talk to people in marriages or different situations where they've actually put a child in the place of Jesus. They've tried holding on to control of all kinds of different things. They put everything in their life in place of Jesus, and they hold it there. And the reality is you won't keep that relationship and you lose Jesus. You can't have both. But the beautiful thing is when I love and serve Jesus and when Michelle loves and serves Jesus, it actually brings us together because like as we come together under Jesus, it's kind of crazy how it unites us. Oh, you got a bingo again? Or not you, but somebody else. Okay. Wow. Oh, so I'm not very good at those. I need to learn like the card throwing thing. So yeah, if you attempt to hang on to normal in your life, you'll lose everything. And that's what they're doing. They're holding on to what they think they know. They want the religious system. They want the law. They want the temple. They want normal. They don't want Rome coming in. And the reality is they're going to lose it all. They can't hang on to it. And so if you don't let go to hang on to Jesus, it doesn't matter what you're hanging on to because you're not going to keep it anyways. But when you serve and you follow and you pursue and you take up the gift from Jesus to become a disciple and take salvation, like it's crazy the blessings he gives you. And so don't follow Jesus because you get blessings. Follow Jesus because of who Jesus is, but Jesus gives you some amazing blessings. So here he is. He's trying to hold on to normal. They're trying to prevent the fact that they don't want to lose what it is. And they're missing the main concept. What they think they're doing, they're killing Jesus to save the political state of the Jewish nation, the temple, the law. But what they're actually doing is they're helping set into motion a plan that God had from the beginning of time that would bring together the whole world. rescue us from death, rescue us from the so-called rooftop that's getting flooded. So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. They don't know what they're doing is leading to a totally different outcome. But here they are, they're working on it. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people, and he left Jerusalem. He went to a place near the wilderness, to the village of Ephraim, and stayed there with his disciples. It was now almost time for the Jewish celebration. Many people from all over the country arrived in Jerusalem several days early so they could go through the purification ceremony, and we're going to start looking at some of that stuff coming up here before Passover began. They kept looking for Jesus because they know that he should be around. But as they stood around the temple, they said to each other, "What do you think? He won't come for Passover, will he?" Meanwhile, the leading priests and Pharisees had publicly ordered that anyone seeing Jesus must report it immediately so they could arrest him. So here they are, they're at this crisis point in their life, and they're missing the fact that God himself is there. And they're trying to kill him because they like what they have. They don't want to let go with it. But they do kill Jesus, and it helps them keep the temple for a little bit. AD 70, anybody know what happens in AD 70? So this is like AD 33-ish. Anybody know what happens in AD 70, the year 70, like 40 years later? The temple's destroyed. The temple's brutally destroyed. Rome comes in, overthrows Israel as a nation, overthrows the Jewish nation. They kill them like mad. It's actually pretty brutal. So Josephus, who was a historian at the time, he recorded that like in the slaughter of the destruction of Jerusalem as the Romans are coming through, that they're burning the houses down to the ground, and there's so much blood flowing through the river or through the streets that it's like a river that's actually putting out the houses that are on fire. Now, it's probably a little exaggerated, but it's brutal. The temple that they're trying so hard to protect here, when they miss the fact that Jesus is the way to God, not the temple that they have, the temple, Titus destroys it, the Roman general Titus. It gets burnt, gets some very horrific things happening to it. There's children in the room, so I won't fully say exactly how all it goes, but I can tell you afterwards if you're curious. But it is utterly destroyed. And it hasn't been built since 2,000 years. They're trying to build it right now in Israel, but it hasn't been built. So here they are. They think that they can hang on to what they can keep. They think that they can protect their normal, so to speak. They think that they can control this whole thing with how God's working with humanity. And instead, they put themselves in a position against the will of God. And they miss the fact that Jesus is the only way home from exile, right? Like that's this main phrase, right? Like Jesus died for the entire nation, but not just that nation, but to bring together and unite the children of God. Quite often as I talk to people, I have this thought thrown at me, or people propose this idea that, why would God send somebody to hell? Why would a loving God send you there? And they miss the point. I think that as a culture, somehow we've missed this idea that if you don't believe in God or don't believe in Jesus, don't do the right things, don't whatever, like Jesus is going to send you to hell. But that's actually not biblical. Now you might be like, wait, what? I've been in my church my whole life, and I thought that was biblical. The reality is that where we're at apart from God is already on a path to hell. We're already an enemy of God. We're already doing things that are in opposition, just like these people were. We're part of the problem in the sense that this horrific disease called sin, rebellion, evil, sin isn't just something you do, it's this condition of the rebellion that is against God. And we're part of it. We've passively taken part, we're born into it, we've actively taken part in it, like nobody in this room is righteous, including me. And so it's this idea that, like, when you think God's going to, this loving God's going to send you to hell, like it's that you're starting off perfect, you're starting off good, and somehow Jesus didn't like you, and so he's sending you from good to a place away from him, an exile away from him. But the reality is we've already put ourselves on that path. And Jesus didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. And so it's like the idea isn't that we're in the helicopter already and Jesus is kicking us out of the helicopter and into the water to drown. It's we're already there. And Jesus is coming in as God's rescue plan to say, hey, you know what? If you want out of this condition, if you want out of where you're at, if you want out of the horrificness of where you are, there is a way out. It is to come together and be united to God through Jesus and through the gospel, right? Like, Jesus is the only way home from exile. It's not like we're in the kingdom and we got kicked out. It's that humanity chose years ago to leave. And we're already outside the kingdom. And Jesus is saying, you know what? I'm going to give you a way back in. You don't have to go where exile is going. You don't have to be apart from the kingdom. And so if we're willing to let up the land of exile, so to speak, we can come into the kingdom. But we can only come in on the terms that Jesus has, which is the fact that it's him alone. He is the only way to safety. And so the good news isn't the fact that God's going to send people to hell if they don't believe in him. The good news is the fact that while we were sinners, while we've screwed up everything we can, while we're in rebellion, while our lives are broken, and that manifests in so many different ways, while we're in this condition, Jesus came to save us. Jesus came to provide hope, and that is the good news. But it requires us to be able to recognize that we have to decide if we're going to hang on to what we got, what we think is our normal, or if we're going to trust him and be willing to let go of everything and cling to him. And what's crazy is I don't know how sometimes he does it. Like, he brings stuff with us too. Like I was just thinking of this the other day, like Abraham and Isaac, if you know the Old Testament, like God asked Abraham to give up Isaac. Isaac is the son of promise. Isaac is the one that's going to be Abraham's descendant that fulfills all the promises of many children and many generations. And then God says, hey, you know what? Let go of him. Give him up. And Abraham in faith did that. And God let him keep him. Right? Like, God wants us to know that, wants us to come to the place, are we willing to put God in front of everything? Are we willing to surrender to the Holy Spirit working in our lives? Are we willing to say yes to the King in every aspect of our lives? And he may ask us to give up things. And if he gives them back, they're good. If he takes them away, it's good. Right? Like, think about like a kid. If you had a kid, little kid, I've had little kids. They're not little anymore. Something changed. But let's say like they have a gallon of bleach because I was not smart enough to lock the cabinet. And they're getting ready to start drinking a gallon of bleach as a little kid, don't know any better. And I'm like, hey, you know what? You need to give up everything and let me have it. And I'm going to replace it with something better for you, some apple juice, some whatever, right? If the kid is willing to let go and I give them something else back, is it better for them? In fact, a loving God will take things out of your life that you might not even understand how terrible they are for you if you're willing to let them go. And if he gives it back to you, it's because it's good. If I give my kids something back to them that is good for them, you know, and the idea of like a good parent, I mean, I guess I know that there's sometimes not always good parents. You want to know the difference between a good mom and a great mom? The pastor with ADHD, right? You want to know the difference between a good mom and a great mom? A good mom lets you lick the beaters when she's making cookies. A great mom turns the blender off first. Like, if God's saying, hey, are you willing to let go of everything? And you say yes, and you hang on to him, he might give it back to you because it's good for you. If he doesn't give it back to you, it's good for you because maybe he knows something about it that you don't. But until you're willing to recognize that Jesus is the only way home from exile, and you're willing to let go so you can have him, you're not going to get back into the kingdom. And so if your faith is not in Jesus Christ, if you've never said, Jesus, I want to let go of this world and I'm going to hang on to you and I'm going to trust that whatever you take or you give me is good and I'm going to be willing to follow that. If you've never done that in your life, today's a great day to come home and meet Jesus. If you have put your faith in Jesus and you're still trying to hang on to things, today's a great day to reevaluate stuff in your life and ask the Holy Spirit, is there something I need to be willing to let go of? But in this whole thing, the only way to come together and be united as the children of God is through Jesus. Death binds you, but Jesus untangles you, as we looked at last week. Jesus is the only way to come home to the Father. But it means you got to be willing to let go of stuff. So here's what I want us to wrestle with today as we wrap up. What are you hanging on to? What is something in your life that you're like, man, I don't trust Jesus enough to let go of that? And ask him, what am I supposed to do with that? Maybe I don't trust Jesus enough with my life to let go of my life in my control, and I'm hanging on to it because I don't trust him to save me. Man, today is a great day to let go of what you think you know and turn it into surrender at Jesus. In a little bit, we're going to have communion, and then we're going to have some prayer ushers over here. If you want to pray with somebody to give your life to Jesus, there's people over there in a little bit that would love to pray with you to help you give your life to Jesus. If there's something you want to pray about, like letting go of, there's going to be people that would love to pray with you on that. But I want us to just spend a few minutes reflecting on where we're at before God and what are we willing to let go of so that we can have him. So I'm going to pray. We'll reflect on it for a couple seconds, and then we'll transition into communion, which reminds us of what Jesus gave us when we let go. So Jesus, we love you. We thank you. We recognize that you alone are the only hope for humanity. You alone are the only hope for us. And there's things in all of our lives that we tend to hang on to replace you. And Jesus, I pray that you would speak to each of us now. What are things that we're unwilling to surrender so that we can surrender them today and trust that you're good? We trust that you have better wisdom than us on what we should keep. We trust that you want to give us good things. And so if there's something you take from us and don't give it back, we trust that that was best for us. So Jesus, I pray that you would speak to each of us now on what we do with this so that we can be more open-handed to be able to hang on to the gift of life that you give us and to live in the resurrection power. In your name, amen.